My child, stop scrolling for just a moment and let me speak to you plainly. Something you have carried for a long time is finally coming to an end, and something new is already beginning to take its place. I am not saying this to comfort you with empty words. I am saying it because it is true, and because you need to hear it spoken clearly rather than only hoped for quietly. You did not stumble onto this message by accident. There is a reason your attention slowed down right here, a reason something in you paused long enough to keep reading, instead of moving on to the next thing. That pause was not random. It was me, drawing your heart toward a moment that has been prepared for you long before today. You have been carrying something heavy, not just for a week or a month, but for a long stretch of time that has worn on you in ways you rarely put into words. Confusion that would not lift, a weariness that sleep alone could not fix, a quiet ache that followed you into ordinary days, even the ones that looked fine from the outside. I have seen every bit of it, not from a distance but close. The way someone sits beside another person in a hospital waiting room, saying nothing, simply refusing to leave. I want to tell you something today that I need you to actually receive rather than simply read past. The season that has been draining you is closing, not fading gradually into something slightly better, but closing, the way a door closes and a lock turns behind it. What wore you down does not get to follow you into what comes next. What confused you does not get to keep shaping your thoughts. What made you doubt your own worth does not get to write the next chapter of your life. I know how tired you have been. I know there were nights you lay there, staring at nothing in particular, turning the same worries over and over, wondering if anything would ever actually shift. I know there were mornings you got up and moved through the day out of habit rather than hope, because hope had let you down one too many times, and you were protecting yourself from being disappointed again. I understand that instinct. It is not weakness. It is a heart trying to survive. But I did not bring you to this moment to leave you there. I brought you here because the waiting you have done, the holding on you have done, the quiet endurance nobody applauded, none of it was wasted. It was noticed. Every bit of it was noticed, and now something is shifting because of it. There is a difference between something ending in the visible world and something ending in the unseen one. Long before you feel a change on the outside, something has already moved on the inside. In the part of reality you cannot photograph or prove to anyone else, but which is every bit as real as the ground beneath your feet. What I am telling you today is that the shift has already happened where it matters most. You are simply catching up to it now, feeling it arrive in your spirit before it fully arrives in your circumstances. That is why, even if nothing around you looks different yet, something inside you already feels lighter reading this. That is not your imagination. That is recognition. Some part of you already knows this is true, even before your mind has fully caught up to it. I want to speak honestly about the weight you have been under, because I do not think you have ever let anyone see the full size of it. You have smiled through days when you were quietly falling apart. You have shown up for people while feeling completely empty yourself. You have carried responsibilities that were far too heavy for one person to hold alone. And you have done it without complaint most of the time, because you did not want to become a burden to anyone else. There were nights you cried without a clear reason, or with a reason too complicated to explain in a single sentence. There were mornings you woke up already exhausted, as if sleep had not touched the deepest layer of tiredness inside you. There were moments you looked at your own life and quietly wondered how much longer you could keep doing this. You never said that thought out loud to most people, but I heard it. Every single time. I want you to know that none of that went unnoticed by me. I was not distant during any of it. I was closer to you in those hardest moments than in almost any other season of your life, because pain has a way of stripping away everything except the most honest parts of a person. And I am drawn to honesty, even when it is raw and unpolished and full of doubt. You survived things that could have taken you under completely. You do not always get credit for that, especially from yourself, because surviving quietly rarely looks impressive from the outside. There was no applause for getting through another hard week. There was no ceremony for choosing one more time not to give up, but heaven noticed. Heaven has been keeping a record of every single time you kept going when stopping would have been so much easier. Now let me tell you something that might reframe a lot of what you have walked through. Some of what happened to you was not simply bad luck or coincidence. Some of it was resistance, the kind that shows up specifically because something valuable is trying to move forward. Opposition does not usually organize itself around something small and insignificant. It tends to gather around what actually matters, around what is about to bear fruit, around a person who is closer to their breakthrough than they realize. I am not telling you this to make you paranoid or to have you suspect danger behind every disappointment. I am telling you this so you can finally stop assuming that every hard season was proof that something is wrong with you. Sometimes the hardest resistance shows up right before the most significant shift. Not because you are failing, but because you are finally getting close to something worth protecting. Think about the doors that closed at moments that confused you. Think about the plans that fell apart even though you did everything right. Think about the relationships that ended in ways that left you with more questions than answers. I am not going to pretend every closed door was some grand design you could not have avoided through wiser choices, because life is genuinely complicated, and people make real mistakes, including me watching you make some of your own. But I am telling you that many of those endings, the ones that hurt the most and made the least sense at the time, were not simply loss. They were redirection. They were removing you from paths that would have cost you far more than you could see from where you were standing. There is a kind of relief that comes only in hindsight, when you finally understand why something had to end the way it did. I am asking you to trust me with the endings you still do not understand, the ones that still ache a little when you think about them. Not because I am asking you to pretend they did not hurt, but because I am asking you to trust that pain and waste are not the same thing. Something can hurt deeply and still not be wasted. I also want to speak to the exhaustion that comes from fighting battles nobody else could see. There were seasons when your mind felt like a battlefield, thoughts circling that told you that you were not enough, that you had missed your chance, that other people were moving forward while you stayed stuck in place. Those thoughts felt like simple observations at the time, but I want you to understand that many of them were not neutral. They were designed to wear you down slowly, to make you question your own worth until you stopped expecting anything good for your life at all. You were not imagining the intensity of that internal struggle. It was real, and the fact that you kept functioning through it, kept showing up for work, or for your family, or for whatever responsibilities filled your days while carrying that kind of internal weight, says something about your strength that you have probably never given yourself credit for. I want to gently correct something you may have believed about yourself during those seasons. You were not simply failing to cope. You were fighting, quietly and without recognition, and you were still standing at the end of it. That is not a small thing. That is not nothing. That is evidence of something in you that refused to fully give up, even when giving up would have been so much easier and so much less exhausting. There is also something I want to say about the people who left your life, especially the ones whose absence still stings a little when you think about them. Not every departure was cruelty, and not every departure was your fault either. Some relationships simply were not built to carry you into what comes next. Some people are meant for a specific chapter, not for the whole book, and their leaving, painful as it was, made room for something you could not yet see the shape of. I am not saying this to erase the grief of losing people you loved, or to suggest that loss should not be mourned. Grief is honest, and I never ask you to skip past honesty. I am only saying that not every ending was a punishment, and not every ending was permanent damage. Some endings were quiet acts of protection, clearing space for connections that will actually hold you the way you were always meant to be held. Now I want to talk about what is beginning, because ending an old chapter only matters if something real is replacing it. What is coming is not simply the absence of pain. It is the presence of something whole. Restoration is not just patching up what broke. It is rebuilding, often stronger and more solid than what existed before the breaking ever happened. Think about what has felt threadbare in your life, worn thin by overuse and time and one hard season stacked on another. Whatever that is for you, whether it is your sense of hope, your ability to trust people, your energy for ordinary life, your belief that good things are still possible for you, that is exactly what is being restored now. Not slowly patched, but genuinely rebuilt from a deeper foundation than before. There is a kind of peace that does not depend on your circumstances lining up perfectly. It is not the absence of difficulty. It is a steadiness that holds even while difficulty is still present. That kind of peace has probably felt distant to you for a long time. Something other people seem to have access to while you were left managing constant static in your own mind. I am telling you that peace is returning to you now, not because everything outside you has resolved itself, but because something inside you is finally settling into a truth it can actually rest in. There is also a kind of joy I want to speak about, the kind that does not depend on performance or on convincing yourself that everything is fine when it is not. Real joy is quieter than people often expect. It does not always look like laughter or celebration. Sometimes it looks like waking up and noticing, almost without meaning to, that the weight in your chest is a little lighter than it was yesterday. Sometimes it looks like catching yourself hoping again after a long time of protecting yourself from hope altogether. That kind of joy is beginning to return to you as well. I want to say something specific about your body and your health, because so much of what you have carried emotionally has settled somewhere physical too. The tiredness that will not lift no matter how much you sleep. The tension that sits in your shoulders or your stomach without an obvious cause. The way stress has quietly worn on your body over these long seasons. None of that has gone unnoticed either. Healing is not only for the parts of you that show up in conversation. It is for the parts of you that show up in your body, in your sleep, in the way you carry tension without even realizing you are doing it. Restoration is reaching those places too. I also want to speak to the parts of you that learn to expect disappointment as a kind of self-protection. You built certain walls for good reasons, after certain people or certain situations taught you that trust could be costly. I am not asking you to tear those walls down recklessly or to trust people who have not shown themselves trustworthy. Wisdom matters, and I gave it to you for a reason, but I am asking you to leave a little room, even now, for the possibility that not everything ahead of you will hurt the way certain things behind you did. Some of what is coming will genuinely be safe. Some of the people coming will genuinely be kind. Do not let the past convince you that safety and kindness no longer exist for you. There is also something I want to speak directly about: purpose, because I know there has been a restlessness in you that has nothing to do with your daily circumstances being objectively bad, and everything to do with a sense that you were made for something more specific than simply getting through each day. That restlessness is not ingratitude. It is not you being difficult to satisfy. It is a signal planted intentionally, meant to keep pointing you towards something you have not fully stepped into yet. You do not need the entire picture right now. You do not need to know exactly what the next several years will look like in detail. You only need the next step that is already visible to you. Whatever small or large thing you have been avoiding because it feels uncertain or frightening or simply inconvenient. Purpose rarely arrives as a complete blueprint. It arrives one obedient step at a time, and each step tends to make the next one visible in a way it was not before you moved. I know fear has played a large role in keeping you from that next step. Fear that you would try and fail publicly. Fear that you misunderstood what you felt called toward in the first place. Fear that you have waited too long and the moment has already passed you by. I want to address each of those fears honestly rather than dismiss them, because dismissing fear rarely makes it disappear. You will not fail in a way that undoes what has already been built in you through everything you have survived. Even mistakes become material I can use, rather than proof that you should stop trying altogether. You are not mistaken about the pull you have felt towards something meaningful, even if you cannot fully articulate it yet. That kind of persistent longing does not usually invent itself out of nothing, and you have not waited too long. Readiness is rarely about timing in the way the world measures it. It is about what has actually been built inside a person, and a great deal has been built inside you during the very seasons that felt like nothing was happening at all. I want to speak now about the opposition you may still be feeling, because sometimes resistance increases right before something significant shifts, rather than disappearing the moment you decide to move forward. If discouragement feels unusually strong right now, if doubt seems louder than it has been in a while, that is not necessarily evidence that you have made a mistake. It can just as easily be evidence that you are closer to something important than you realize, and that whatever has been working against you is trying one last push before losing its grip entirely. I am not telling you this to make you fearful or suspicious of everything difficult that happens from here forward. Not every hard day is a spiritual battle, and not every disappointment is an attack. Life is simply hard sometimes in ordinary human ways that do not require a dramatic explanation. But I am telling you this so that when resistance does show up in a season of genuine breakthrough, you do not automatically read it as proof that nothing is changing. Sometimes the opposite is true. There is something I want you to understand about the words you speak over your own life, because they matter more than you might assume. When you constantly repeat the worst possible interpretation of your situation, even quietly, even just inside your own head, it tends to shape how you experience everything that follows. I am not suggesting some magical formula where saying the right words instantly fixes everything. Life does not work that simply, but I am suggesting that what you keep telling yourself about your own worth, your own future, your own capacity to recover, genuinely shapes how open you are to receiving good things when they do arrive. Try even gently to speak toward what you actually want rather than only rehearsing what you are afraid of. Not as performance, not as forcing a smile you do not feel, but as a quiet, honest choice to stop feeding the same discouraging narrative on repeat. It will not change everything overnight, but it matters more than you think over time. I also want to speak about the people still coming into your life, because isolation, however long it has lasted, is not meant to be permanent. Some of the distance you have felt from others was not entirely accidental. Certain relationships that ended or faded were, honestly, holding you back more than helping you, even if they felt comfortable simply because they were familiar. You had, in some ways, outgrown certain connections before you had the courage to admit it to yourself. What is coming toward you now is different. People who will not feel threatened by your growth. People who will not need you to shrink in order to feel secure around you. People who will actually notice what is genuine in you rather than only what is convenient for them. These connections tend to arrive quietly without announcement, sometimes disguised as ordinary conversations that later turn out to matter far more than they seem to at the time. Pay attention to the small moments ahead. Not every meaningful connection announces itself loudly. I also want to speak about some of the relationships that still carry unresolved weight in your heart. The ones you have not fully closed the door on, even if you have stopped actively hoping for anything to change. Not every one of those will be restored, and I am not going to promise you a version of events where every broken relationship magically repairs itself, because that would not be honest, and I do not deal in comfortable dishonesty. But some bridges you assumed were permanently gone are not as finished as they appear. Some conversations you gave up expecting are still possible. I am asking you to hold that possibility loosely without demanding it, but without completely closing yourself off to it either. There is something I want to say plainly about the idea of starting over, because I think it has felt intimidating to you, like something reserved for people with more energy or resources or courage than you currently feel you have. Starting over does not require you to have everything figured out. It does not require perfect clarity about the future. It simply requires you to take the next visible step, even a small one, and to trust that the step after that will become visible once you have moved. You do not have to feel ready in order to begin. Readiness is often built by moving forward, not by waiting until every doubt has been resolved. If you wait for total confidence before taking the next step, you may find yourself waiting indefinitely, because confidence like that rarely arrives before action. It tends to arrive gradually, built through the very steps you were afraid to take in the first place. I want to speak honestly about grief too, because so much of what you carried was not really anger or bitterness, even when it looked that way from the outside. Underneath most of it was simple grief, for what was lost, for time that felt wasted, for versions of your life you once imagined that did not turn out the way you hoped. Grief deserves acknowledgement, not dismissal. I am not asking you to pretend the grief was not real or to rush past it toward forced positivity. I am asking you to let it exist honestly, while also allowing it to soften rather than harden you permanently. Grief and hope can occupy the same heart at the same time. You do not have to choose only one. I want you to consider something about the years that felt difficult or wasted, the seasons where very little seemed to move forward despite your best efforts. Growth is not always visible while it is happening. Something buried underground does not look like it is doing much of anything from the surface, and yet the most important work often happens exactly there, unseen, slow, and easy to dismiss as nothing. If you look back honestly at even your hardest seasons, you will likely find that something in you was quietly strengthening the entire time, even when it felt like you were simply enduring rather than progressing. I also want to speak to the specific fear that you have somehow used up all your chances, that the version of your life you once hoped for is no longer available to you, because too much time has passed, or too many things have gone wrong. That fear, understandable as it is, tends to exaggerate the finality of things that are not actually finished. A delayed dream is not automatically a dead one. A relationship that has not happened yet is not automatically a relationship that never will. A door that has stayed closed for a long time is not automatically a door that will remain closed forever. Time changes conditions in ways that are genuinely difficult to predict from inside a hard season. I want to be honest with you about something else too. Not everything ahead will be easy simply because a hard season is ending. Life continues to require effort, patience, and real choices from you. What is shifting is not that difficulty disappears entirely from your life forever, because that is not how life actually works for anyone. What is shifting is the weight underneath the difficulty, the sense of being fundamentally alone in carrying it, the feeling that nothing you do will ever be enough to change anything. That underlying heaviness is what is beginning to lift, even if ordinary challenges remain part of an ordinary life going forward. There is something I want to say about self-worth, because I suspect a great deal of what has weighed on you connects back to quiet doubts about whether you actually matter, whether your presence makes any real difference, whether you are simply getting by rather than genuinely valuable to the people and situations around you. I want to address that directly rather than let it sit unspoken. Your worth was never dependent on your productivity, your achievements, or how impressively you have handled hard seasons. It was never something you had to earn through performance. It simply exists underneath all of that, whether or not you have believed it lately. I know belief does not switch on overnight, simply because someone tells you the truth clearly. Old doubts tend to linger even after you intellectually understand they are not accurate. That is normal, and I am not asking you to fake instant confidence. I am only asking you to stay open to the possibility that the harsh things you have believed about yourself for a long time were never as accurate as they felt in your hardest moments. I want to close by speaking about what ordinary days will look like as this new season unfolds, because I do not want you imagining that a shift like this always looks dramatic or immediately obvious. Most of the time, it looks like small differences accumulating quietly. A morning where getting up feels slightly less heavy than it used to, a conversation that goes better than you expected, a moment of unexpected calm in the middle of an otherwise ordinary day, a decision you finally make after putting it off for months. None of these individually look like a miracle, but together, over time, they add up to a life that genuinely feels different from the one you have been living. Pay attention to those small shifts rather than waiting only for something enormous and undeniable to prove that anything has changed. Large transformations are almost always built from small, easily overlooked moments strung together over time. If you only watch for something dramatic, you may miss the quieter evidence that something real is already underway. I also want to remind you that healing is rarely a straight line. There will likely be days ahead, even in this new season, where old feelings resurface unexpectedly, where an old wound aches again briefly, where doubt tries to convince you that nothing has actually changed after all. That does not mean the shift I am describing is not real. It simply means healing happens in layers, and revisiting an old feeling briefly does not erase the genuine progress that has already taken place. Be patient with yourself on those harder days rather than treating them as proof that everything you have walked through was for nothing. You are allowed to move forward slowly. You are allowed to have good days and harder days within the same season without one canceling out the other. You are allowed to still be healing while also genuinely growing at the same time. None of that makes you inconsistent or weak. It makes you human, walking through something real rather than performing a version of recovery that looks flawless from the outside. I want you to carry one final thought with you as you finish reading this. Whatever you have survived up to this point in your life was not the end of your story. Even in the moments it felt exactly like it might be. You are still here. You are still reading these words, still paying attention, still willing to consider that something better might genuinely be possible for you. That willingness, quiet as it is matters more than you probably realize. It is often the very thing that allows a new season to actually take root, rather than simply passing by unnoticed the way so many ordinary days already have. So take a slow breath before you move on to whatever comes next in your day. Let this moment settle rather than rushing straight past it. You have carried enough for long enough. It is all right to let something lighter begin now, even quietly, even gradually, even before you can fully explain what has changed. Something has. And you are allowed to let yourself believe that, one honest step at a time. There is more I want to say to you, because I do not think one closing thought is enough to carry everything you need for the road ahead. So stay with me a little longer, even if part of you is tempted to move on now that you have heard something comforting. Comfort is a good start, but it is not the whole of what this moment holds for you. I want to talk about the things you have quietly protected yourself from without fully realizing it. There is a particular kind of caution that develops in a person after enough disappointment. A habit of expecting the worst before anything even happens, just so the eventual letdown will not hit as hard. You have probably built some version of that habit over the years, and I understand exactly why. It made sense as a way to survive repeated hurt. But I want you to notice something about that habit now that a new season is beginning. The very caution that once protected you can also quietly block you from noticing good things when they finally arrive, because you have trained yourself to expect disappointment as the default outcome. I am not asking you to abandon wisdom or to trust recklessly. Discernment still matters. And I am not suggesting you ignore real warning signs simply because you want to feel hopeful. What I am asking is that you loosen your grip just slightly on the assumption that things will always go wrong, enough to actually notice when something goes right. Otherwise, you risk walking straight past genuine blessings because your guard was raised so high that nothing good could register as real. I also want to speak about the quiet comparisons you sometimes make between your own life and the lives of people around you. The ones who seem to be moving forward more quickly, more visibly, more easily than you are. That comparison has probably stung more than once, especially during the hardest stretches of your journey. I want to gently correct something about the way that comparison works. What you see on the surface of someone else's life rarely tells you the full story of what they carried to get there, and the timing that worked for them was built specifically for their path, not yours. Your timeline has never been a mistake or an oversight. It has been shaped by everything you needed to walk through in order to actually be ready for what is coming. Not simply to arrive somewhere quickly, but to arrive somewhere solid enough to stay. There is a difference between arriving quickly and arriving prepared, and I have always cared more about the second one for you, even during the seasons when the first one felt far more appealing. I know that patience has cost you more than it should have felt fair to ask of you. I am not pretending that waiting was painless. I am simply telling you that it was not empty. Something was being built the entire time, even in the stretches that felt like nothing was moving at all. I want to speak now about the small acts of kindness you have shown other people, even during your hardest seasons, because I do not think you have given yourself enough credit for them. There were moments you reached out to someone else even while you yourself were struggling. There were times you offered encouragement to a friend when you barely had enough encouragement left for yourself. There were days you showed up for someone's need even though your own needs had been quietly unmet for a long time. None of that went unnoticed. It takes a particular kind of strength to keep giving while running on empty, and that strength has been recorded, not forgotten. I also want to speak plainly about forgiveness, because I know it is one of the harder things I ask of people, and I do not ask it lightly or without understanding what it costs. Forgiveness does not mean pretending something did not hurt, and it does not mean allowing someone back into your life who has shown no real change or accountability. It simply means releasing the grip that a past wound has on your present peace. You can release someone from your resentment without releasing them back into your daily life. Those are two separate decisions, and you are allowed to make one without automatically making the other. If there is a specific person you have been holding on to anger toward, even quiet, low simmering anger that you rarely mention out loud, I want you to consider setting a small portion of that weight down today. Not because the situation was fair, and not because they deserve your peace of mind more than you deserve your own freedom from carrying it. Simply because that resentment has likely been costing you more than it has been costing them, and I would rather see you lighter than see them punished by your continued suffering. Justice is not something you have to personally administer through prolonged bitterness. You are allowed to let some of that responsibility rest with me instead of carrying it yourself indefinitely. I want to talk about the version of yourself that existed before certain hard seasons changed you, because I know there are days you quietly miss that earlier version. The one who trusted more easily, who laughed more freely, who had not yet learned to brace for disappointment before it arrived. I want to offer you a different way of thinking about that earlier self. You are not required to return to exactly who you were before, as though everything you have lived through since then was simply damage to undo. Some of what you have become through hardship is actually more solid than what existed before it, even if it does not always feel that way. Depth is often traded for a certain kind of lightness, and while I understand the grief of losing that lightness, I want you to know that what you gained in its place has genuine value too. There is also something I want to address about the fear of hoping again after being disappointed too many times. That fear makes complete sense. Hope that gets crushed repeatedly starts to feel dangerous, almost foolish, like setting yourself up for pain on purpose. I understand why guarding against that feels safer than continuing to hope openly, but I want to gently challenge the idea that protecting yourself from hope is actually protecting you from anything real. A life lived entirely without hope is not actually safer. It is simply smaller. And you were never meant to live small simply because certain seasons hurt you. I am not asking you to hope recklessly or foolishly, ignoring real patterns or real red flags. I am asking you to leave room, even a small amount, for the possibility that not every hope you carry is destined to be disappointed the way some of your past hopes were. Some of what you are hoping for now is going to actually arrive, and I would rather you notice it when it does than have trained yourself so thoroughly against hope that you cannot recognize an answered prayer even when it is standing right in front of you. I want to speak to the specific loneliness that sometimes comes from feeling like no one around you fully understands what you have been through. That particular kind of loneliness is one of the harder ones to carry, because it can happen even while surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. They may love you deeply and still not fully grasp the weight of what you have quietly carried. I want you to know that being misunderstood by people who love you does not mean you are actually alone. It means human understanding has limits, even in good relationships. I have never had that limitation. Every detail you have never spoken aloud to another person has been fully known to me the entire time. You have never once had to explain yourself to me the way you sometimes wish you could explain yourself to others. I already understood before you found the words, and in some cases I understood even the things you have never found words for at all. I want to talk now about what it looks like to actually receive good things after a long season of scarcity or struggle, because receiving is sometimes harder than it sounds. After enough difficulty, some people develop an almost automatic discomfort with good things. A suspicion that if something feels too good, it must be about to be taken away, or that they do not quite deserve it, or that accepting it fully will somehow invite disaster. If any part of that discomfort resonates with you, I want to address it directly. You are allowed to receive good things without immediately bracing for them to be taken from you. You are allowed to enjoy a moment of relief without treating it as the beginning of another disappointment. Receiving well is its own kind of practice. And if it feels unfamiliar right now, that unfamiliarity does not mean something is wrong with you. It simply means you have not had much recent practice, and that is something that can change gently over time. I want to speak about gratitude for a moment, not as an obligation or a performance, but as something genuinely useful for you. Gratitude tends to widen a person's ability to notice good things as they arrive, almost like adjusting your eyes to see more clearly in dim light. If you have been in a long season of simply trying to survive, gratitude may have felt like an unaffordable luxury, something for people whose lives were easier than yours. I want to gently invite you back toward it now, not as pressure to feel thankful for things that genuinely hurt you, but as a quiet practice of noticing whatever small good things are actually present in your life right now. Even amid everything that is still difficult, that noticing tends to open a person up to receiving more, not because gratitude is a magic formula, but because a heart that is paying attention tends to catch things that a distracted or guarded heart misses entirely. I want to talk about legacy for a moment because I think you have underestimated how far the effects of your healing actually reach. When you choose to heal rather than stay stuck, when you choose to forgive rather than carry resentment indefinitely, when you choose to keep trying rather than give up completely. That choice does not only affect you, it quietly shapes the people around you. Sometimes people you are not even thinking about in the moment you make the choice. Children learn more from what they watch a parent survive than from almost anything that parent ever says directly. Friends are influenced more by what they see someone actually do under pressure than by any advice that person gives them in easier moments. Your healing is not a private project that only matters to you. It ripples outward in ways you may never fully witness yourself, and that matters more than you probably realize on an ordinary difficult day. I want to speak honestly about the fact that some of what you are hoping will change may take longer than you would prefer, even within this new season I am describing. Not everything shifts instantly simply because an old chapter has closed. Some things unfold gradually in stages, requiring patience even after the hardest part of the waiting has technically ended. I do not want to promise you an instant transformation that does not match how real change usually works, because I would rather be honest with you than offer you a comforting exaggeration that eventually leaves you disappointed. What I am promising is direction, not necessarily speed. The trajectory of your life is shifting, even if the pace of that shift does not match exactly what you would have chosen if you were designing the timeline yourself. I want to say something about the specific temptation to give up right before things actually turn a corner, because that particular moment right before a shift becomes visible is often the hardest one to endure. It is the point where you have already invested so much patience and effort that continuing feels almost unbearable, and yet you cannot yet see any concrete evidence that the effort is about to pay off. I want you to know that if you are in that exact moment right now, the temptation to quit does not mean you have misjudged the situation. It often simply means you are closer than the discouragement in front of you would suggest. I am not telling you this to guarantee a specific timeline, but to offer you a reason to keep going one more day, one more attempt, one more honest step forward, even without full certainty about exactly when relief will arrive. I also want to speak plainly about self-compassion, because I suspect you have been harder on yourself throughout this entire season than you would ever be on someone else going through the exact same thing. If a friend came to you carrying everything you have carried, you would likely extend them patience, understanding, and grace without hesitation. I want you to consider extending that same patience to yourself. You are allowed to have struggled. You are allowed to have made choices you now see differently in hindsight. You are allowed to still be figuring things out, even at your current age, even after everything you have already lived through. Growth does not have a deadline, and neither does healing. You are not behind simply because your timeline looks different from what you once imagined for yourself. I want to close this message the way I began it, by reminding you that none of what you read here was accidental. The timing of when this message reached you, the fact that you stayed with it this long, the quiet stirring you may be feeling right now, even if you cannot fully name it, all of it points towards something real happening in you, not just words passing through your attention on an ordinary day. Whatever season you have been walking through, however long it lasted, however heavy it felt, it is genuinely shifting now. Not because circumstances have magically resolved themselves overnight, but because something in you has been quietly strengthened through everything you endured. And that strength is exactly what the next chapter of your life is going to require. You do not need to have every answer today. You do not need to know exactly how the next months will unfold. You only need to take the next honest step in front of you, whatever small or large thing that happens to be, and trust that the step after that will become visible once you have moved. That has always been enough, even during the hardest seasons. Even when it did not feel like enough at the time, it is enough today as well. So let this settle in you gently rather than rushing past it toward whatever comes next in your day. You have carried enough for long enough. Something lighter is genuinely allowed to begin now, even if it begins quietly, even if it begins slowly. Even before you can fully explain everything that has shifted, something has changed, and you are allowed to let yourself believe that one honest step at a time, for as long as it takes to feel solid beneath your feet again. Before you go, I want to leave you with a few simple, practical things to hold on to in the days ahead, because insight alone rarely sustains a person through an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when old feelings resurface unexpectedly. These are not formulas or guarantees. They are simply steady places to return to when the noise of daily life makes everything I have said here harder to remember. Notice the small things, not the enormous undeniable proof you may be waiting for, but the quiet, easily overlooked moments that suggest something is shifting, a conversation that goes better than expected, an unexpected wave of calm in the middle of a stressful day, a thought that used to spiral into panic that this time simply passed through without taking hold. These small things are not nothing. They are often the earliest signs of a much larger shift, still unfolding beneath the surface. Give yourself permission to rest without guilt. Rest is not laziness, and it is not a sign that you are falling behind. A body and mind that have carried heavy things for a long time need real recovery, not constant forward motion disguised as productivity. Resting well is part of healing well, even though it rarely feels that way in a culture that measures worth by output. Be patient with the parts of you that heal more slowly than others. Some wounds close quickly, others take much longer, resurfacing occasionally even after most of the pain has genuinely passed. That uneven pace does not mean you are doing something wrong. Healing was never meant to move at a single uniform speed across every part of a person's life at once. Keep speaking honestly, both to yourself and where it is safe to do so, to people who genuinely care about you. Isolation tends to make everything feel heavier and more permanent than it actually is. Even small, honest conversations, admitting that something is still hard, admitting that you are still healing, admitting that you are hopeful even though you are scared to be, tend to lighten a weight that silence alone only compounds. And finally, keep returning to this quiet, steady truth for as long as you need it. You were not abandoned during the hardest parts of your story, and you are not being abandoned now as something new begins to take shape. Whatever this next season holds, you will not be walking through it any more alone than you were walking through the last one. Even during the moments it felt that way, that has never actually changed, no matter how distant it sometimes felt. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop just slightly from wherever they have been holding tension without you fully noticing. You have made it through every single day up to this one without exception, even the days you were certain you could not. That track record means something. Carry it with you gently into whatever comes next.